Hi everybody, we are going to shift gears now and talk about factor markets. We're going to do this over the next 4 nights and we're going to divide that up. We're first going to talk about what factor markets are, and we'll talk about factor demand. Those are the 2 things we'll talk about tonight. We're then going to talk about the market for land and capital tomorrow night, or Sunday night rather, then the market for labor, and then we'll talk about income distribution. So let's get into factor markets. Let's talk first about what a factor of production is. I like to think about a factor of production as an input or a resource. And you may hear those 2 terms on the AP exam. A factor, you might also hear it called an input or a resource, that's used in the production of goods and services. There are 4 factors of production that we talk about. Land, so resources provided by nature. Think of that very broadly. So actual land, the land we stand on, or dirt or sand or trees or natural resources. Labor, so is the work done by people. Capital is physical capital like tools, machinery, factories, plus human capital like education and training. So separate from this, which is actual, think of it, the physical labor associated with building things like shoveling and moving things around. Human capital applies to education and training that goes into making people skilled in order to complete tasks. Entrepreneurship is the talent for taking risks, to bring together, that should be bring, not being, bring together resources for innovative production. These 3 are relatively easy to quantify. This one is a lot tougher. We'll spend most of our time on these 3. Let's also talk about the definition of derived demand, because you'll hear that a lot in the discussion of factor markets. Let's take an example. Nursing is an increasingly hot job in the market for labor as the U.S. population ages. Why? Because there are more older people and nurses are in higher demand. Well, what does that mean? The demand for nurses is derived from the demand for the services they provide, nursing care for the elderly in this case. So as the demand for nursing services increases as the population ages, the demand for nurses increases. So the demand for nurses is derived from the demand for the services they provide. That's just one example of derived demand. Let's talk now about how we assign value to the inputs of different factors of production. Let's recall the marginal product of labor. We discussed this way back in module 54, I think it was. Marginal product of labor over here is nothing more than the change in output. So here, total product, so output, in this case I think we're talking about lemonade and number of cups output per hour, divided by the change in labor. Said another way, how much do we get? What's the marginal product produced by an additional unit of labor? So in this case you can see 1 unit of labor produces 8, so the marginal product is 8. 2 units of labor produce 18, so the marginal product of that additional unit of labor is 10, and so on and so on. This, you'll recall, is the graph that results from graphing this data, where you have marginal product of labor on the side, or on the y-axis, and then the number of labor units hired along the x-axis. So this marginal product of labor tells us how much additional output the next worker brings to the firm, so marginal product. But how many dollars will the worker's efforts bring to the firm? That's the next step we're going to take in this, and this is one of the new things that we'll learn this evening. So let's head to the next slide. So let's first start with the definition. The total monetary benefit. The total monetary benefit of hiring each worker is called the value of the marginal product, or VMPL, value of marginal product, in this case of labor. Value of marginal product of labor equals the price of the output times the marginal product of labor. Pretty straightforward. Let's take an example. Suppose the price of lemonade is $2 a cup. We add a column to the table and compute the value of the marginal product. Again, value of the marginal product is price of the output times the marginal product, in this case marginal product of labor. So similar to the prior chart, we have units of labor, total product, the marginal product of labor that we calculated, and the value of the marginal product is simply that marginal product times the price of the output. In this case, the cups of lemonade are $2 each. So you can see here how we compute the various the value of the marginal product that's produced. You can see this is decreasing. So how do we take this information and make decisions about how many units of labor? Well, in this case, we decide to hire a worker if the value of the marginal product of labor is greater than or equal to the wage. So why are we talking about wages? Well, because our unit of input here is labor, and we need to value that unit to compare it to the value that it's creating. What are we going to do? We're going to say we'll hire a worker if the value of the marginal product of labor is greater than or equal to the wage. That makes sense. It also makes sense that you'd never hire a worker if the value of the marginal product of labor, so the value of what that additional unit of labor creates, is less than the wage. What we ought to do here is stop hiring workers up to the point where, or at the point where value of marginal product of labor equals the wage. Sounds surprisingly similar to marginal cost equal marginal revenue. So keep in mind this is a profit maximizing hiring decision for any factor of production, not just labor. So it's land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. The last unit of any factor is hired when the value of its marginal product is exactly equal to the marginal cost of hiring it. So let's take a look at that. For example, let's assume that in our lemonade stand, the wage of the worker is $8. Well, how many units of labor will be hired? Here's how we figure that out. We look at units of labor. We look at the value of the marginal product of labor. Again, here, calculated the same way we did it on the prior graph. We look at the wage, and we start comparing the wage of the additional worker compared to the value of the marginal product that worker is producing. And you can see here, if the value of the marginal product of labor of the next unit is greater than or equal to 8, we will hire and make profits by hiring that unit of labor. So you'll see we're hiring. Yes. We'll stop when the value of the marginal product is actually less than the wage. Or rather, we wouldn't hire this unit of labor. We'd stop after the 5th unit. We can also see this in a graph. So what we've done here is taken the value of the marginal product of labor. We've put that on the y-axis, and we take, we take the units of labor and we put them on the x-axis. And you can see here that as we increase the units of labor, we are actually decreasing the value of the marginal product of those units of labor. So what you see here is the same as the law of demand. The value of the marginal product of labor curve serves this curve serves as the demand for labor. So for any factor, the value of the marginal product curve serves as the demand curve for that factor of production. Pretty straightforward derivation here, using again the value of the marginal product on one side and the units of labor, one side being the y-axis and the units of labor on the x-axis. Let's talk now about shifts in the factor demand curve. What is going to make this curve shift? So move to the right, move to the left, or may say move outward or move inward. There are three external variables that'll shift the demand curve. First is changes in the prices of goods. The second is changes in the supply of other factors. And the third is changes in technology, and we'll go through each of those individually. Let's look first at the change in the prices of goods. So let's assume that the wages return to the original level that we had talked about. I believe that was 4. And, return to the original level of 8. We had looked at it going up to 12. But the price of the lemonade is now $4 per cup rather than $2 a cup. So you'll see here, rather than 2, we have 4. And we're looking at the value of the marginal product again. We have here the price. We have the marginal product. And we have, sorry, we have here a typo. This was at 2 times 8. This should actually be 4 times 8 is 32. So you get the same series of calculations that we had up here. You'll see 2 times 8 is 16. You add then 2 times 10 is 20. Here, when it goes to 4, this would actually be 32, not 16. But you see here you get value of the marginal product of labor. You get the wage. So it went down to its original level of 8. Price is now $4 a cup. We have the same series of decisions to make. Well, look what's happened here. Because the price of lemonade has risen, the 6th unit of labor is now hired at the same wage of 8. Whereas before it was only the 5th unit, and the 6th unit actually the value of marginal product of labor was less than the wage. So what happened here? Well, the demand for labor shifted outward, and you can see that now on a graph where you're looking at the value of marginal product of labor. Here we had that $8. The entire demand curve shifted out because now that $8 value of the marginal product of labor is associated with 6 units of labor and not with 5 units of labor. So the entire curve shifts outward. We'll talk about this more. We'll do some more examples. Let's talk about the other 2 factors that can shift that demand curve out. The first is changes in the supply of other factors. So if labor is paired with capital like tools, the labor is usually more productive. So the capital is more plentiful. If capital is more plentiful, usually the marginal product of each unit of labor is higher. And that will shift the value of the marginal product curve outward, and more units of labor are hired. Think of it as each unit of labor becoming more productive as units of labor are paired with other factors. Third is changes in technology. So think of it as production and efficiency being increased across the board. So in some cases, technology replaces certain factors like machines, replacing labor, but in the long run, better technology allows the labor force to be more productive in what they do. Think of it similar to number 2 up here, where we're replacing, or rather pairing labor with capital, like tools, like a hammer. Think of here the laborer getting an air hammer or a jackhammer, so something that makes that unit of labor even more productive. That will push the demand curve outward because we're seeing that increased value of the marginal product of labor associated with that the higher units of labor. So real quick review here, key economic concepts for this module. Factors of production are labor, land, capital, and entrepreneurial ability. Factor prices help to allocate resources across the economy and affect the distribution of income across the 4 factors. Benefits of the hiring the next unit of a particular factor, and we talked about labor tonight, is the marginal product. So marginal product of labor, when we were talking about labor, of that unit multiplied by price of the product being produced. So in our case, we were talking about cups of lemonade. This is the value of the marginal product. For labor, the value of marginal product equals the marginal product of labor times the price. And remember, the profit maximizing hiring decision is to hire units of labor to the point where value of marginal product of labor is equal to the wage. You can see that as we go up and we talk about value of marginal product here, talk about the wage here, and we would hire that 6th unit of labor. Also, the value of the marginal product curve. So this curve is also the demand curve for that factor. It will shift outward if the price of the output rises, as we saw here, price of the output rising, and that was the price of the cup of lemonade. And if other factors become more available. So we talked about that labor getting the hammer in his or her hand, and also if production technology improves. That's it. Have a great night, and I will talk to you tomorrow.